Hello everyone. First of all, this is the GSoC project for adding end-to-end testing for Android in our React Native app. I'm Anant. I'm from India, and my mentor is Mello here. So for this particular project, first a bit of context. So over here, the why and the what. So right now in the Rocket.Chat React Native library, the app, we currently have end-to-end tests running for iOS using a library that we use Detox. Currently, those tests run on CI and on local machines as well, but for iOS only. Uh, and this keeps the door open for some platform specific bugs, like one we did encounter during the development of this project as well. And that is something that we wish to remove completely. The Android tests can also actually be run on a wider variety of systems because, like, not everybody has Mac. I myself do not have a Mac, so Diego is helping me with testing that everything is running on the iOS side as well. But then that also makes it accessible for other people to also evaluate the project using the end-to-end tests. So for the scope for this project, particularly, it is to implement the tests that we already have running with Detox. So first, we need to integrate the Detox library with our Android build. Uh, so first we do that. Secondly, we need to modify and improve the existing tests to, first of all, run well on Android because there are some platform inconsistencies with how the React Native stuff works on Android and iOS. Uh, and then also to make them like increase the speed or make them more efficient and make sure like the flakiness of these tests is reduced because end-to-end tests, as a lot of you might know, that they are flaky by default. So we need to make sure that they are reliable, and we need to integrate the actual testing that we build in this project that we make feasible to actually have it running in our CI pipeline, so that we all like always run these tests whenever a new pull request is added. So, but first, what is Detox? So the definition from the GitHub page, it is a gray box end-to-end testing and automation library for mobile apps. So in this case, gray box differs from the other, like the black box testing, because in black box testing, you don't have any knowledge of the code base. You just test as any user might, just looking at the visuals and recognizing the features of the app visually. Particularly in Greybox, Detox actually does connect with our app internally as well, knows about the code structure, knows about what the structure of the app being shown on screen is, and knows where the buttons and different elements are. And then it tries to interact with them just as a normal user would. But using a Greybox testing strategy does help with some flakiness where recognition is involved, and it makes a test a bit more reliable. So, another description of Detox particularly would be that it is a unified API for us to use and to programmatically interact with the Android and iOS devices. In this case, the iOS simulator. So we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. We can do interactions like we can touch on screen, scroll down, type text, and for the purposes of this particular project, since we're talking about Android, on Android, it actually leverages the Espresso Android testing framework built by Google. So that's what we're using under the hood. So there are some limitations because of that as well. But overall, it works quite well when we reduce a lot of the flakiness. That is true, Singh. Max, a legendary item over here as well. So before going into the later parts of the project, we can actually look at the tests running over here. So originally I was going to do a real-time run, but Diego promptly advised me against it and saved everyone from about 27 minutes of boredom over here. So we can just look at the video. And this is the E2E. So the first video is going to be the E2E tests. So this is just a 1-minute video. The tests are going to start up any moment now. Yeah. So there is no audio for this, of course, but the test run, it checks everything, and this part was like already running on iOS, but we're just now working with a different set of uh, views, different platform, and so some things have to be changed. Like so on iOS particularly, the text typing isn't actually as slow as it is on Android. If we type the text in real time using the testing library. But for Android, we had to change that almost everywhere, where typing it in real time is not a requirement, so that the tests actually run well, the flakiness is reduced, and it's actually viable in a production environment. So those are the end-to-end encryption tests. And for the second one I have over here, we are going to look at some room actions, just some basic ones over here as well. So these are the tests, which again already work on iOS, and now they work on Android as well. Okay, so I think I attached the wrong video over here. But it's basically the same stuff. It again goes to the rooms and clicks some buttons and does like take some actions. And we can actually look at the test running in CI as well in just a moment. So since that is also implemented. So the first task, now going into the actual implementation, the Detox for Android integration. This was the most straightforward part of the project. We just followed the Detox documentation. So this was some improvisation on my part. So because Detox requires network requirement, so it requires us to add clear text permissions in the app, which allow insecure network communication for the app. So we had to create a separate flavor. We can actually, I'll actually go into more detail in the challenges part about this. And then we set up the configuration of the actual tests and the emulator. So this was actually the most, the simplest part of the project. And we went through the integration and the test now, like after this, the tests start up locally. The second part was adapting the existing test for Android. So this was actually not that straightforward. There was a lot of trial and error because just going through the documentation and looking at what is by definition platform specific, we can remove a lot of errors over there. But because of certain differences in how the platforms work, we do just need to have a lot of trial and error and see what breaks and use a lot of workarounds. React Native inconsistencies between the platforms. So this was slightly surprising as well. So for the views, whenever we add text in React Native, it automatically gives them a label on iOS, but it does not does so the accessibility label, but it does not add a similar label on Android. So because of this, certain tests were broken. Now, for those tests, the preferred approach was to actually add the label wherever required, so that it might also help in accessibility since those labels are preferred. But there were some places where it wasn't feasible, so we had to change the tests over there. And the inherent flakiness. So even between Detox running on the React Native debug mode and React Native release builds, there were certain inconsistencies running them on the Android emulator. And we could get around a lot of these. So we can talk about the removing the flakiness part and how certain parts were removed in the challenges part as well. And the third part, which I am most excited by as well, so integrating it into CircleCI and GitHub Actions or GitHub Actions. So this wasn't actually straightforward at all. So the first step in this process was to research different platforms and the usability for Android testing, because if you use a CI platform for Mac and you're doing iOS testing, it's like all of them are going to have iOS testing built in. That's a requirement for the Mac system. But for Android, we need certain hardware requirements. We need certain permissions even. So kernel level permissions, KVM emulation, and those weren't readily available everywhere. Uh, the second step was to write the optimized configurations for the platforms, and this was also important because these two different platforms, they have different, both of them have the different plugin structures, the different syntaxes, and the different processes in how we will have to handle the Android compatibility. So we have different workarounds for both of them that aren't well documented either, and to reduce flakiness. So running from a local machine to transitioning to CI, we had a different set of problems because it's an emulator at the end of the day. So we had to get around different issues and reduce the flakiness so that so that it would actually be viable in a production environment and be able to run on every pull request and give us reliable results. If not the first time around, at least on like rerunning it once, it should tell us reliable results. I'm sorry about that. The flow of the CI process. So just looking into the CI process a slight bit, we split the process into parts. So the first process is the build. We build our release app on Android. The second part is actually using the built APK in the next four jobs. So the next four jobs over here. So the first screenshot is from CircleCI CLI on top, and the screenshot on bottom is from the GitHub Actions configuration. So in both of them, we have the build job first, and then the actual testing job. So we have different tests in our testing environment for the app. So we have some tests which are in the assorted folder, some which are related to the onboarding experience, some which are related to the rooms themselves, and some which are upcoming with the Teams features. These have been recently added. And this process works for both the platforms. Yeah, Diego. So I'll just talk a bit more about that in the particular challenge. The individual test jobs run parallel and save time, of course. So since we have four different jobs, we first build the APK, retain that over the different tests, and then run the tests in the different test jobs. So now we can actually discuss some of the issues a bit more in depth. So the first one, which I mentioned earlier, was the network requirements for Detox. So the Detox on Android requires the clear text communication permission to be added in a manifest. So that actually is considered a security risk by Android itself. That is why it is an explicit permission, and we did not want to add any unnecessary permissions in the release app. So what the workaround that I was able to get to and implement was that we're using the separate build flavor for Android. In this particular build flavor, we retain all the properties from the release build, but add this simple network addition as well. And this network requirement is only fulfilled by this particular flavor, so it does not affect the rest of the app and any of the release builds. And this is the particular flavor that is then being used for the testing purposes. Platform-specific methods. So Detox uses the Apple simulator for iOS testing. So this is a particular area to especially note, a particular point, because it does not actually run on actual iOS devices. It's running on the iOS simulator. Because of this, it is actually able to do certain things that the Android emulator does not allow. So the simulator is kind of purpose-built for the tests. So there were some tests, so like in this case, we can talk about the internationalization tests. So Detox on iOS uses some launch arguments, which can be sent to the Apple simulator. And then we can start the app just for that particular session in a different language and test our internationalization is working correctly. But on Android, since we're using an actual device in an emulator, we can't actually change the language in launch arguments. So we found there was a way around that where we could actually change the system language itself on Android using ADB commands. But for the time being, we decided against it after testing it because that's not a very elegant way of doing it. And the decision was to look at integration tests instead to maybe check internationalization, or in the end, perhaps possibly use the ADB commands itself. Gray box testing and flakiness. So since we already talked about gray box testing, while being aware of what the code is actually doing helps make it a little bit more deterministic. Other types of OS emulator problems or emulator problems still add up to the overall flakiness, and one particular issue which hopefully will be solved by Detox or by us with Detox in the future is that when we run the when we run the debug app, particularly, it tends to force stop in certain areas, but it's only on the debug app, and that is some like level of inconsistency on how it works on the emulator. The release app goes through every time fine over there, but being aware of the process and so Detox waiting for all the processes to be idle and looking at the network activity between the React Native packager and the app itself as well. That adds some issues over there which will have to be solved in the future. Or since we're actually just using the release builds for the time being, it works fine. And then like another issue that we had was with looping animation. So in our emojis on Android, we have GIFs as well. So when we test the GIF portion, the GIFs appear on screen and they are infinite in each, of course. So because of that, the render thread on Android is almost active, and the detox synchronization uh, doesn't let the tests move on until the GIFs go off screen. So and they don't automatically go off screen. So for now, we have excluded those tests. There are certain workarounds that have been suggested by the community in Detox for that, but that then is excluding those GIF tests from our process for now, even using those workarounds. CI, emulation, and resources. So this is one of the more interesting parts. So running the tests on CI platforms actually differed a lot because it depends a lot on the hardware resources and what the doc images and what the platform allows us to do. So on GitHub Actions, particularly, we have a workaround. So the problem is that we do not have KVM emulation enabled on all platforms. Most definitely, it's disabled on Linux and Android platforms wherever we have those on CI. But on GitHub Actions, particularly, we have KVM enabled by default on macOS images, and that is not exactly a feature that is mentioned in the documentation, but it's just how it is. So that is something that we're using as a workaround right now, and it's well established in the community as well at this point. So that seems to be a reliable way to do it. Okay, all right. So this is the last part, and so that is how we're running the test on GitHub. And for CircleCI CLI, we actually need to have large resource classes and use one particular Docker image, and the test will run over there as well. The key learnings, of course, testing methodologies with Detox or Greybox testing, they have been very helpful and enriching. Best practices while writing interaction tests, and thanks for Diego for enforcing these on me. And it's been a great journey learning those from him. The best practices for open source contributions and structuring code well. So learning about open source and the practices, that has been really interesting and enriching. And I really hope to use that in the future for a long time. Docker and CI, particular exposure to CircleCI and GitHub Actions. And the future scope, in the end, some tests are excluded right now, as we just talked about, because they're either failing on Android or because of Detox limitations. We have to find appropriate workarounds. CircleCI has to be tested and compared with GitHub Actions, even though GitHub Actions is actually implemented right now and it's working in the branch that I have for it. All the tests are passing over there. System localization tests have to be written as either new E2E tests or integration tests, just mentioned. And some upstream contribution to Detox might actually help in getting around the GIF issue. This is something which I'm looking into right now. And hopefully suppressing GIFs would not be needed, but that might be a viable option in the future. Finally, so just to wrap it up, I'm extremely grateful to Diego and the Rocket.Chat community and team for this opportunity. It's been really enriching. Diego has been a source of inspiration and motivation all the way. So I'm not trying to read it from over there, but still. And in particular areas as well. So talking about the localization, Dev, that I like to call it GIF. I'll be happy with whatever you like. And so in certain areas like the text we mentioned, where type text is slower than replace text, I so Diego's intuition was really important in a lot of places like that, where we were actually able to make the test faster. And this will hopefully also translate to iOS test being a little bit faster as well. And so that was it for the presentation. Thank you everyone for bearing with me for so long, and we'll be happy to take any questions now. Yash, so for running the detox test on CircleCI. So we can't use so Android 86, Android x86 emulation actually requires KVM emulation to be enabled in the kernel. On Linux Docker images, we do not actually have that or enabled by default on GitHub Actions or CircleCI, and we do not present that as an option. So the workaround is to actually use macOS machines, because on GitHub Actions, the emulation layer is like enabled by default, and that's just how it is. So we're able to conveniently do that over there. On CircleCI, we are actually able to run in Linux. So we're using one particular image, Docker image. But yeah, so on CircleCI, we can actually use the Linux machines, but on GitHub Actions, we have to use macOS images. Right now they are focused around the correctness of the UI, if I believe so. The so about the performance, do you want to take that, Diego?
I answered that in the chat, but Detox adds an extra layer inside the app, so this is why Detox isn't reliable enough. So we can measure performance. This is why we test only the UI, as Anand said.
Levy, the most problems would definitely be just working with the tests again and again, because like sometimes sometimes the test would fail for some reasons, sometimes for other reasons. So just running them again and again, because to get all of the issues in and be able to get to a reliable point where they pass 90% of the time. So that was kind of repetitive,
the
but was also
flakiness from end-to-end tests are always a mess. And also, Anant configured everything on Android, and everything should be running properly as they were on iOS, but that was not really the case, because even though tests works correctly on iOS, they don't on Android, because they are two different platforms that they behave differently, right?
Right, and so something which I noticed was they don't actually run it on iOS devices. So only using the simulator also allows for a bit more deterministic approaches over there. So not actually having an iOS device.
Server side, we technically we do have a test configured to be run both on your local Docker if you want, but they by default they run on this mobile.rocket.chat server. Do we need to wrap up?
Yeah, we only have we don't have time actually. So thank you everyone for having me, and thanks a lot, Diego.
Congratulations, Anant. It's been great to work with you, man. You did a great job, and we'll still need to figure out some edge cases, but I hope we can merge this PR soon. So thank you for your effort, and yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. And it's quite a long story, but thanks, Diego, for actually jumping in, and then in the last minute agreeing to a project. And this is such a valuable project to us. I know that Diego was going through, like, the team was just expanding. There was a lot of workload. So I think the existence of this project is a miracle to start with, and having such good results is just fantastic. Thanks. Okay, and I'm going to stop recording.